The marble floor gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Zhao Mingwei's voice boomed across Global Finance Center's crowded lobby. $500 million. Solve this portfolio optimization problem, and $500 million becomes yours tonight. The giant screen erupted with swirling mathematical formulas that had stumped financial experts for months. Amara Hudson paused mid-swipe with her mop-gray uniform wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Zhao's manicured finger pointed directly at her. "You there? You clean up messes all day. Maybe you can clean up this math problem too." Laughter rippled through designer suits as smartphones lifted to capture the moment. Amara set down her mop handle. Her spine straightened like steel. "I accept your challenge." The laughter stopped. Something in her voice suggested this wouldn't be entertainment. The silence stretched like a taut wire across the marble expanse. 200 faces turned toward Amara, expressions shifting from amusement to confusion to something approaching curiosity. The investment showcase had become an unexpected theater, and she stood center stage with a mop handle still dripping in her left hand. "Excuse me." Zhao's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched toward his hairline. His $1,000 suit remained immaculate, but sweat beaded along his collar. "This problem has defeated Harvard Business School professors, teams of MIT graduates. You're suggesting that you—" His gesture encompassed her gray uniform, the cleaning cart, the industrial-grade rubber gloves dangling from her belt. "I'm suggesting nothing." Amara's voice carried across the lobby with unexpected authority. "I'm accepting your challenge. $500 million for solving your portfolio optimization problem. You made the offer publicly. I'm holding you to it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like water disturbed by thrown stones. Someone near the back called out, "This is ridiculous." Another voice added, "Let her try this, should be entertaining." Smartphones emerged from pockets and purses, recording devices aimed at the unlikely confrontation unfolding before the towering glass windows that overlooked the city's financial district. Zhao's jaw tightened. His dark eyes swept the crowd, measuring their reactions. The lobby's crystal chandeliers cast sharp shadows across his angular features as he weighed his options. "Very well, but understand the parameters. This is pension fund portfolio optimization worth $2.8 billion, 847 variables, 30 minutes maximum." He checked his platinum watch with theatrical precision. "Step-by-step explanations required. No guessing, no luck involved." The crowd pressed closer, forming an irregular circle around the confrontation. Investment bankers in expensive suits stood shoulder to shoulder with venture capitalists clutching champagne glasses. The evening's formal presentations had been forgotten entirely, replaced by this impromptu spectacle that none of them could have anticipated. Amara approached the display screen, her worn sneakers silent against the polished floor. The mathematical formulas loomed above her correlation matrices' risk parameters, constraint equations that would challenge graduate-level statisticians. She studied the swirling numbers with the same focused intensity she'd once brought to Stanford lecture halls before everything collapsed into accusations and exile. "I'll need a whiteboard," she said without turning around, "and a calculator." "Security." Zhao's voice cut through the lobby's ambient noise like a blade through silk. Two guards in navy blazers materialized from positions near the elevators, their radio static crackling softly. The taller one, Martinez, had been watching the exchange with growing unease. His partner Johnson kept one hand near his communication device. "We have a situation developing." Zhao continued his tone, suggesting official concern. "Individual disrupting the investment presentation. Building management should be notified immediately." Martinez approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing against the marble. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us. Building management has received reports of someone causing a disturbance during tonight's event." "Reports from whom?" Dr. Patricia Wells stepped forward from the crowd, her silver hair catching the chandelier light. The Stanford finance professor's voice carried decades of academic authority. This woman accepted a public challenge. She has every right to attempt it under the terms that were offered. The crowd began to fracture along invisible lines. Some pressed closer, drawn by the unfolding drama like moths to flame. Others backed toward the exits, uncomfortable with the escalating tension and uncertain about potential liability. A woman in pearls whispered loudly to her companion, "Someone should record this for insurance purposes." Multiple phones tracked every movement, every expression, creating a digital record that would prove impossible to suppress. Zhao's fingers moved across his phone screen, with practiced efficiency typing rapidly. Within seconds, both guards' radios crackled simultaneously. A voice emerged through the static, distorted but clear. "Code yellow in main lobby. Potential disturbance requiring immediate security response. Please assess and advise. You have 30 minutes. Zhao announced, his confidence returning as the security pressure mounted. The giant screen shifted, displaying a countdown timer that began its relentless march toward zero. The red digits pulsed with malevolent energy, marking each second that slipped away. Amara accepted the whiteboard marker that someone offered from the crowd. Her hand remained steady as she began writing the foundational equation. The portfolio weight constraint, basic but essential. Below it, she added the expected return formula. The crowd quieted, watching her methodical approach with growing fascination. "Portfolio variance," she announced, writing the more complex equation on the pristine whiteboard. "The correlation matrix is where your problem begins." Three men in expensive suits exchanged glances near the far wall. Dr. James Kim from Harvard Business School leaned toward his colleague, his voice barely audible above the ambient tension. "She knows what she's doing. Look at her technique, that's graduate-level portfolio theory." Martinez shifted uncomfortably, one hand resting on his radio. "Ma'am, building security requires all unauthorized personnel to vote." And the interruption came from Maria Santos, the cleaning supervisor, her accented English carrying clearly across the space. "These people want entertainment. Let them decide democratically. Should she continue or not?" The suggestion rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Voices rose in immediate debate. "Let her try. This is absurd. I want to see where this goes. Building policy clearly states unauthorized access." All in favor of allowing the challenge to continue. Dr. Wells raised her hand high. Hands shot up throughout the lobby, some hesitant, others emphatic. The count was swift and decisive, democracy in action. 127 in favor, someone called out. 89 opposed, another voice added. Zhao's expression darkened as the democratic result became undeniable. The crowd had chosen entertainment over expediency, curiosity over convention. His perfectly planned showcase had become something entirely unpredictable. Amara turned back to the whiteboard marker poised. "The correlation matrix shows negative eigenvalues," she said, writing specific numbers that violated fundamental financial theory. "This is mathematically impossible. Technology and healthcare sectors have historically positive correlation during market downturns." The timer displayed diminishing time as whispers began spreading through the assembled investors like ripples across still water. Dr. Kim stepped closer to the screen, his expression shifting from skeptical to genuinely concerned. "She's absolutely right. Those correlations violate basic financial theory." Security guards exchanged uncertain glances. Their radios remained silent as building management waited for clearer instructions. Zhao stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed challenge begin to unravel, under scrutiny he'd never anticipated. The crowd's energy shifted again, mockery giving way to genuine interest, skepticism transforming into curiosity about what this unexpected challenger might reveal. Zhao's phone buzzed against his palm as he stepped away from the crowd's immediate attention. His fingers moved with urgent precision, scrolling through contacts until he found the name he needed. The call connected on the second ring. Elena, I need you here immediately. Global Finance Center main lobby. Emergency consultation. His voice remained low, but the tension underneath was unmistakable. Bring your MIT credentials. Full professor status financial mathematics department. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived within 12 minutes, her heels clicking against marble as she navigated through the dispersing crowd of onlookers. Her navy blazer bore the subtle MIT insignia, and she carried herself with the confident stride of someone accustomed to academic authority. The crowd parted instinctively, recognizing the arrival of what appeared to be legitimate expertise. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zhao announced, his voice cutting through the ambient chatter. "I've called in Dr. Elena Vasquez from MIT's Financial Mathematics Department to provide proper oversight of this unusual situation." His gesture toward Amara carried subtle dismissal, a practiced technique for undermining without direct confrontation. Elena approached the whiteboard, where Amara continued her calculations, studying the equations with theatrical intensity. "These methods are severely outdated," she declared, her voice projecting across the lobby with academic authority. "Modern portfolio optimization requires sophisticated computational approaches, not these elementary formulations." The crowd's attention shifted like a pendulum between the two women. Elena's polished presentation contrasted sharply with Amara's practical uniform and straightforward approach. Several investors nodded approvingly at Elena's critique, their confidence in the established order momentarily restored. Furthermore, Elena continued, warming to her performance, "I must inform everyone present that this individual was terminated from Stanford University for research misconduct, specifically falsifying data in hedge fund optimization studies that resulted in significant investor losses." The revelation hit the crowd like cold water. Whispers erupted immediately, spreading through the assembled group with the speed of digital transmission. "Research fraud. Stanford fired her. We're listening to a disgraced academic." The mood shifted perceptibly, curiosity giving way to skepticism and concern. Amara's hand never paused in its steady movement across the whiteboard, but her shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. "The research I exposed," she said without turning around, "was being used to manipulate pension funds. The falsified correlations were designed to hide systematic theft from retirement accounts." "That's her version," Elena interjected smoothly. "Academic review boards don't terminate tenured professors without substantial evidence of wrongdoing." The crowd fractured again, this time along lines of trust and credibility. Some began moving toward the exits, uncomfortable with the escalating complexity and potential legal implications. Others pressed closer, drawn by the unfolding drama that seemed to grow more complicated with each revelation. Maria Santos stepped forward from her position near the service elevators. "Ms. Hudson lost her house," she said simply. "Had to take cleaning work to survive, but she never stopped studying those papers people throw away. Every night reading financial documents in the break room." The admission hung in the air like suspended judgment. Here was someone who had fallen from academic heights to manual labor, yet continued pursuing the knowledge that had once defined her life. The crowd processed this information with varying degrees of sympathy and suspicion. Amara turned from the whiteboard to face Elena directly. "Since you're from MIT's Financial Mathematics Department, perhaps you can explain the significance of negative eigenvalues in a correlation matrix." Elena's confidence flickered. "That's elementary graduate coursework." "Then explain it." The challenge was direct, unadorned, and impossible to deflect without appearing evasive. Elena's eyes swept the crowd, calculating her options as seconds stretched into uncomfortable silence. "The specific technical details aren't relevant to the broader methodological concerns I've raised. A correlation matrix with negative eigenvalues," Amara continued, addressing the crowd rather than Elena, "violates the fundamental mathematical requirement that correlation matrices be positive, semi-definite. It's like claiming that 2 + 2 = -7. Dr. Kim stepped closer to the whiteboard, his expression shifting from skeptical to genuinely alarmed. She's correct. Those eigenvalues indicate the correlation structure is mathematically impossible. Elena's composure began to crack under the mounting technical scrutiny. I don't appreciate having my expertise questioned by someone who was terminated for academic fraud. Your expertise… Amara pulled out her phone fingers, moving quickly across the screen. MIT's Financial Mathematics Faculty Directory shows no Dr. Elena Vasquez. The department has 37 professors. Your name appears nowhere. The silence that followed was different from before, sharper, more focused. Elena's face flushed as the crowd turned toward her with new understanding. Several people began searching their own phones, verifying the claim that was rapidly undermining her credibility. I'm a visiting consultant, Elena said quickly. Not regular faculty. Consulting for whom? Dr. Wells asked pointedly. Elena's eyes found Zhao's across the crowded space, and in that moment of connection, the crowd saw everything they needed to understand. The supposed independent expert was nothing more than another layer of Zhao's increasingly desperate strategy. Time remaining, someone called out, reading from the display screen that continued its relentless countdown. Amara returned to her calculations, adding new equations that built upon her previous work. The mathematical formulations grew more complex, but her explanation remained clear and accessible. The portfolio optimization reveals systematic correlation manipulation designed to hide fund transfers between accounts. Yet she wrote specific numerical values that she had memorized from months of studying discarded documents. Account numbers, transfer amounts, correlation coefficients that violated every principle of modern finance theory. The crowd watched in fascination as the pieces of a larger puzzle began fitting together. $847 million, Amara said, underlining the figure she had calculated. Transferred from employee pension funds to offshore accounts through deliberately falsified correlation structures. Elena backed away from the whiteboard, her role as Zhao's plant now completely exposed. The crowd's attention had shifted entirely to Amara's methodical dismantling of what appeared to be a sophisticated financial crime hidden within an academic exercise. The timer continued its descent as Amara connected mathematical impossibilities to real-world theft, transforming Zhao's challenge from entertainment into something far more serious. The giant display screen flickered once, then twice, before dissolving into static chaos. Mathematical formulas that had anchored the entire challenge vanished into digital void, replaced by error messages, scrolling in endless loops. The crowd's murmur of concern rippled across the marble lobby like disturbed water. Technical difficulties, Zhao announced with practiced regret, his tone suggesting unfortunate but inevitable complications. System crash appears to be complete. We'll need to restart tomorrow once our IT department can restore the data. His movement toward the lobby's exit carried the finality of someone declaring the evening concluded. Amara stood motionless before the blank screen whiteboard marker, still poised in her hand. 23 minutes remained on the countdown timer, the only display element that continued functioning with mechanical precision. Her calculations had been progressing systematically toward conclusions that threatened to expose more than Zhao had anticipated. Convenient timing. Dr. Wells observed her academic skepticism, cutting through Zhao's explanation like surgical steel. The system fails precisely when her analysis was approaching significant findings. Near the building's technical support station, a maintenance worker named Rodriguez glanced nervously at his supervisor. His voice carried just far enough to reach attentive ears. Manual deletion, not system failure. Someone initiated remote wipe protocols. The revelation spread through the assembled crowd with viral intensity. Smartphones emerged again, recording this new development as evidence of potential sabotage. The challenge was no longer about mathematical ability. It had become about deliberate obstruction and emerging cover-up. I can recreate the work from memory, Amara said quietly, her voice cutting through the crowd's agitated discussions. "Give me access to the whiteboard. I'll rebuild every calculation." Zhao's confidence faltered visibly. "That's impossible. The original problem contained 847 variables across multiple correlation matrices. No one memorizes data of that complexity." "I do." Amara approached the whiteboard with renewed determination, her movement suggesting someone prepared for exactly this contingency. Years of studying discarded financial documents had trained her memory for numerical patterns that others considered impossible to retain. She began writing from scratch, her hand moving with mechanical precision across the pristine surface. Portfolio weight constraints appeared first, followed by expected return formulations that built systematically toward more complex variance calculations. The crowd watched in fascination as mathematics flowed from her memory like water from an inexhaustible spring. Portfolio optimization requires establishing fundamental relationships, she explained while continuing to write. The weight constraint ensures total investment equals 100%. Expected returns follow weighted average principles, but variance calculations reveal where manipulation occurs. Dr. Kim moved closer to observe her technique, his Harvard credentials lending authority to his growing amazement. Her mathematical approach is flawless. She's rebuilding complex optimization theory from memory without reference materials. The correlation matrix began taking shape under Amara's steady hand. Numbers appeared in precise locations, each coefficient representing relationships between financial sectors that should follow established historical patterns. Technology versus healthcare, energy versus consumer goods, financial services versus manufacturing, all displayed with numerical precision. "Here," she said, circling specific values that violated mathematical principles. -0.73 correlation between technology and healthcare sectors. Historically, these sectors maintain positive correlation during market stress periods. This number represents deliberate falsification. Elena Vasquez, her credibility already shattered, attempted one final intervention. Memory reconstruction introduces inevitable errors. This woman cannot possibly recreate complex data accurately. Amara turned toward Elena with calm authority. Technology sector correlation with healthcare during the 2008 financial crisis was positive, 0.46. During the 2020 pandemic, positive 0.82. Negative correlations between these sectors violate 30 years of documented market behavior. The mathematical precision of her response silenced Elena completely. These were not approximate reconstructions, but exact historical correlations that any legitimate financial expert would recognize as accurate. Amara's knowledge ran deeper than memorized formulas. She understood the underlying economic relationships that made certain correlations impossible. Security guards Martinez and Johnson exchanged uncertain glances as the challenge continued, despite technical sabotage. Their radios remained silent, building management apparently reluctant to escalate further without clearer legal grounds for intervention. Correlation matrix eigenvalues, Amara continued, adding computational steps that demonstrated her mathematical expertise. Negative eigenvalues indicate the matrix violates positive semi-definite requirements. Mathematical impossibility in legitimate portfolio construction meant she wrote out eigenvalue calculations with methodical precision, each step building toward conclusions that proved deliberate data manipulation. The crowd followed her logic despite its technical complexity, recognizing truth in her systematic approach. $847 million, she said, writing the figure prominently on the whiteboard. Total amount transferred from employee pension funds through correlation manipulation. The falsified matrix hides systematic theft across 17 offshore accounts. Dr. Wells stepped forward to examine the calculations more closely, her academic training allowing her to verify the mathematical relationships Amara had established. These eigenvalue computations are correct. The correlation structure she's identified cannot exist in legitimate financial markets. Zhao watched his carefully constructed challenge disintegrate under mathematical scrutiny he had never anticipated. The cleaning woman who should have provided harmless entertainment was systematically exposing financial crimes hidden within his academic exercise. Time pressure creates inevitable mistakes, he said desperately. Complex calculations require verification, peer review, computational confirmation. Then verify this, Amara challenged, pointing to specific account numbers she had written on the whiteboard. Cayman Islands Trust number 77492. Transferred funds from Global Finance Center, employee pension accounts last month. Amount $42.6 million. The specificity of her accusation struck the crowd like lightning. These were not vague allegations, but precise claims with verifiable details. Account numbers, transfer amounts, dates all stated with confidence that suggested documentary evidence. Maria Santos gasped audibly from her position near the service elevators. Our pension statements showed reduced balances last quarter. Human Resources claimed market fluctuations. Other employees began connecting similar experiences, their whispered conversations creating undercurrent of recognition and growing anger. The mathematical abstractions on the whiteboard suddenly represented their stolen retirement security. Zhao's face had lost all color as Amara continued writing additional account numbers with mechanical precision. Each figure represented another piece of evidence linking his financial empire to systematic theft from working families. The countdown timer showed 18 minutes remaining, but the challenge had evolved far beyond its original parameters. Mathematical proof was becoming criminal evidence, academic exercise transforming into public exposure of massive financial fraud. Offshore transfers require sophisticated correlation manipulation to avoid regulatory detection, Amara explained, adding final calculations that completed her mathematical proof. The portfolio optimization problem was designed to test whether anyone could detect the hidden theft mechanism. Her work stood complete on the whiteboard, mathematical evidence of systematic pension fund theft hidden within academic exercise. The crowd processed this revelation with growing understanding that they had witnessed something far more significant than entertainment. Phone cameras captured every equation, every account number, every piece of evidence that would prove impossible to suppress or deny. Zhao's challenge had created exactly the public documentation that would ensure his crimes could not remain hidden. The whiteboard displayed mathematical evidence that transformed abstract numbers into human tragedy. Amara's systematic reconstruction had revealed not merely academic fraud, but theft of retirement security. From the very people who cleaned these floors, maintained these elevators, and secured these buildings every day. Maria Santos stepped closer to read the account numbers and transfer amounts, her face growing pale as comprehension dawned. "Ms. Hudson," she said quietly, her accented English carrying across the marble space. "What does this mean for us? For our families?" The question hung in the air like suspended judgment. Around the lobby's perimeter, other Global Finance Center employees had gathered during their break periods, custodial staff, security personnel, administrative assistants, whose pension contributions had been systematically diverted through the mathematical manipulation displayed on the whiteboard. "Your pension funds," Amara said carefully, turning to address the growing group of workers, "have been transferred to offshore accounts through deliberate correlation falsification. The $847 million represents retirement savings stolen from approximately 3,000 employees over 18 months. The revelation struck like physical impact. Carmen Rodriguez, who cleaned the executive floors, pressed her hand against the marble pillar for support. "My retirement account showed 37,000 last year. This quarter only 22,000. They said market losses. Not market losses. Amara confirmed, her voice carrying the weight of mathematical certainty. Deliberate theft disguised as portfolio optimization. Your money was systematically transferred to accounts controlled by corporate executives. James Patterson, the night security supervisor, pushed through the crowd with growing agitation. We trusted the company pension plan, 40 years of contributions, and they stole it while we watched the building for them. The crowd of employees expanded as word spread through service corridors and staff areas. Maintenance workers, food service personnel, parking attendants, all discovering simultaneously that their financial security had been systematically undermined by the very institution they served. Joe recognized the dangerous shift in crowd dynamics. Employee anger represented a threat far more serious than academic embarrassment or regulatory investigation. These were people whose livelihoods depended on Global Finance Center, whose loyalty had been purchased through steady employment and promised retirement benefits. Perhaps, he said, approaching Amara with carefully modulated conciliation, we can discuss this situation privately, away from unnecessary public attention. Nothing private about pension theft, Maria Santos replied sharply. These are our retirement funds. We have every right to hear the truth. Zhao's expression shifted toward something approaching desperation as he calculated rapidly diminishing options. The mathematical evidence stood complete on the whiteboard, documented by dozens of phone cameras, witnessed by hundreds of people who could not be intimidated or silenced through corporate pressure. Hudson, he said quietly, positioning himself between Amara and the growing crowd of employees. You're an intelligent woman who understands complex situations. This building employs over 2,000 people. Families depend on these jobs. Stability requires discretion. The implication was clear without being stated directly. Expose the crimes, destroy the company, eliminate employment for thousands of working families. Amara found herself facing the classic whistleblower's dilemma, magnified by immediate human consequences. $10 million, Zhao continued, his voice barely audible above the crowd's agitated discussions. Personal payment, immediate transfer, complete resolution. You walk away tonight, everyone keeps working tomorrow, families remain secure. The offer represented life-changing money for someone who had lost everything to previous whistleblowing efforts. $10 million would restore financial security, provide independence, eliminate the necessity of cleaning floors for survival. The temptation was mathematically precise in its appeal to self-interest. Carmen Rodriguez overheard portions of the whispered conversation. He's trying to buy your silence, she said loudly enough for nearby employees to hear. Offering money to cover up our stolen pensions. The accusation sparked immediate reaction among the assembled workers. How much? What's he paying to keep quiet? Our family's security for sale. The crowd's energy shifted from confusion toward focused anger at the attempted corruption of their advocate. We can't afford to lose our jobs, pleaded David Chen, a maintenance supervisor supporting elderly parents and 2 children in college. If this company collapses, where do we work? Who hires 50-year-old janitors with criminal records from a scandal? His plea resonated through the crowd of employees, creating uncomfortable recognition of their impossible position. Exposure of theft meant potential vindication, but certain unemployment. Silence meant continued exploitation, but preserved livelihoods. Amara studied the faces surrounding her, people whose trust she had earned through shared labor, whose financial security had been systematically destroyed, while they unknowingly facilitated the very crimes that impoverished them. The mathematical precision of their moral dilemma offered no clean solutions. Your pension contributions, she said, addressing the employees directly, were legally protected investments. Federal law requires fiduciary responsibility from plan administrators. What happened here represents criminal violation of retirement security legislation. But if the company goes bankrupt from lawsuits, Carmen pointed out with practical wisdom, bankrupt companies don't pay pensions anyway. We lose everything either way. The crowd processed this harsh reality with growing understanding that their choices offered no guaranteed positive outcomes. Exposure might lead to prosecution and potential fund recovery, but also to unemployment and immediate financial hardship. Maria Santos stepped forward with supervisor authority. "Show of hands," she announced. "Everyone whose pension account shows unexplained losses this year." Nearly every employee hand rose immediately. The visual impact was undeniable, systematic theft, affecting virtually everyone who depended on Global Finance Center for retirement security. "We're already losing everything," Maria continued with quiet determination. "At least this way we fight back. We expose the truth, maybe recover what they stole, maybe prevent them from stealing from other working families." The employee consensus emerged gradually but decisively. Heads nodded throughout the crowd as people recognized that continued silence guaranteed continued theft, while exposure offered the only possibility of justice and recovery. "Do what's right, Ms. Hudson," Carmen said with finality. "We'll find other work if necessary, but we won't let them steal our families' futures." The employee solidarity was complete and unanimous. They understood the risks of unemployment, but chose dignity over exploitation, truth over false security. Their collective decision removed Amara's moral burden while confirming the righteousness of continued exposure. Zhao watched his leverage evaporate as the employees rejected his implicit threat of economic retaliation. His attempted manipulation had backfired completely, strengthening rather than weakening their resolve to pursue justice despite personal costs. The countdown timer showed 14 minutes remaining, but the challenge had transcended its original parameters entirely. Mathematical proof had become criminal evidence. Academic exercise had evolved into workers' rights advocacy, and individual courage had inspired collective resistance to systematic exploitation. Amara returned to the whiteboard with renewed purpose, adding final calculations that would complete the mathematical proof of pension fund theft. The employees watched with quiet determination their solidarity, providing moral foundation for the justice they all deserved. The heavy glass doors of Global Finance Center burst open with theatrical precision, admitting 3 figures in charcoal suits, whose presence immediately altered the lobby's atmosphere. Their briefcases gleamed under crystal chandelier light, and their movements carried the practiced authority of legal professionals, accustomed to intimidating opposition into submission. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lead attorney announced, his voice projecting across the marble space with courtroom authority. "I am Robert Hutchinson, senior partner at Crawford Mills and Associates. We represent Mr. Zhao and Global Finance Center in all legal matters." The crowd's energy shifted perceptibly as legal threat materialized in physical form. Conversations quieted. Phone cameras lowered slightly, and several investors began calculating their potential exposure to litigation. The entertainment value of Amara's challenge suddenly carried serious legal implications. "Ms. Hudson," Hutchinson continued, approaching the whiteboard with measured steps, "you are hereby ordered to cease making defamatory accusations against our client. These statements constitute business interference, industrial espionage, and potential criminal theft of proprietary information." He produced a manila folder from his briefcase with practiced theatrical timing. "This cease and desist order requires immediate compliance. Continued accusations will result in federal lawsuits for damages exceeding $50 million. The legal document passed through several hands as crowd members examined its official letterhead and threatening language. The reality of potential lawsuits sobered the atmosphere considerably, transforming academic curiosity into serious concern about personal liability. Furthermore, Hutchinson announced, directing his attention toward the assembled crowd, "All individuals present, tonight are required to sign non-disclosure agreements regarding proprietary business information discussed during this presentation. Failure to comply will result in individual legal action. A second attorney began distributing thick documents throughout the crowd. The NDAs contained dense legal language, threatening severe financial penalties for anyone who discussed tonight's events publicly. Several investors immediately began reading the agreements with growing alarm about their potential obligations. Security footage from tonight's events, Hutchinson continued relentlessly, constitutes private property of Global Finance Center. Any unauthorized recording or distribution of this material violates federal privacy laws and will be prosecuted to the full extent of legal authority. The legal assault was comprehensive and professionally executed. Within minutes, Hutchinson had transformed Amara's mathematical proof into potential criminal activity, while threatening everyone present with serious financial consequences for supporting her allegations. Dr. Wells stepped forward with academic defiance. These mathematical calculations represent factual analysis, not proprietary secrets. Academic freedom protects scholarly investigation of publicly available information. Professor Wells, Hutchinson replied with cold precision, your tenure provides no protection against federal charges of conspiracy to commit industrial espionage. Stanford University will be notified of your involvement in tonight's illegal activities. The threat against Dr. Wells sent visible shockwaves through other academics present. Professional reputation and career security suddenly hung in the balance of their continued support for Amara's mathematical investigation. Phone cameras disappeared into pockets as people calculated their exposure to legal retaliation. The crowd began fragmenting as individuals prioritized personal safety over collective curiosity about potential financial crimes. Zhao watched the legal intervention with renewed confidence. Professional intimidation was restoring order to his carefully planned presentation, neutralizing the mathematical evidence through threat of overwhelming legal consequences. The correlation matrix analysis, Hutchinson declared, approaching the whiteboard with legal authority, represents proprietary algorithmic information developed through years of expensive research. Public discussion constitutes theft of intellectual property worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Amara continued writing mathematical equations despite the mounting legal pressure. Her hand remained steady as she added calculations that built systematically toward more damaging conclusions about pension fund theft. Ms. Hudson, Hutchinson said sharply, you are ordered to stop immediately. Continued activity constitutes contempt of legal authority and will result in immediate arrest for violation of federal cease and desist orders. These are basic portfolio optimization formulas, Amara replied without turning around. Mathematical relationships that appear in any graduate finance textbook. No one owns fundamental mathematical principles. Her defiance inspired murmurs of support from employees who understood that legal intimidation was designed to suppress evidence of their stolen retirement funds. The mathematical truth stood clearly displayed on the whiteboard, regardless of legal threats designed to obscure it. Martinez and Johnson, the security guards, received urgent radio communication. Code red in main lobby. Legal authorities request immediate enforcement of cease and desist orders. Prepare for potential arrest procedures. The escalation toward physical enforcement created palpable tension throughout the assembled crowd. Legal threats were becoming operational reality as security prepared to physically suppress Amara's mathematical investigation. $847 million, Amara said, clearly her voice carrying across the increasingly tense space, transferred from employee pension accounts to offshore trusts through mathematical manipulation. Account numbers, transfer dates, and correlation falsifications are documented in federal regulatory filings. Hutchinson's expression shifted towards something approaching panic as Amara referenced regulatory documentation that existed beyond his ability to suppress through legal intimidation. Those regulatory filings, she continued, show systematic pension fund manipulation across multiple companies. Global Finance Center represents one component of a broader financial crime network that affects thousands of working families. The specificity of her regulatory knowledge undermined Hutchinson's entire legal strategy. These were not proprietary secrets, but federal documents available through mandatory disclosure requirements that no legal threat could suppress. Dr. Kim stepped closer to examine the mathematical relationships Amara had established. These correlation coefficients match patterns reported in Securities and Exchange Commission filings from the past 18 months. She's correlating publicly available information, not stealing proprietary data. The legal foundation of Hutchinson's intimidation strategy began crumbling as academic experts recognized that Amara's work represented analysis of public information rather than theft of private secrets. Zhao accidentally confirmed these account numbers, Dr. Wells added with growing confidence. His verbal admissions are recorded on dozens of phones. No non-disclosure agreement can suppress evidence of publicly witnessed confessions. The crowd's energy began shifting back toward support for Amara as they recognized that legal intimidation was designed to conceal crimes rather than protect legitimate business interests. Hutchinson made a critical error in his desperation to regain control. Mr. Zhao's verbal statements tonight represent privileged attorney-client communications protected from disclosure under federal confidentiality laws. Zhao wasn't speaking to attorneys, Amara observed quietly. He was making public statements to 200 witnesses. No privilege applies to public confessions made during investment presentations. The legal mistake was immediately obvious to anyone with basic understanding of attorney-client privilege. Hutchinson had attempted to apply confidentiality protection to public statements made before hundreds of witnesses. Several lawyers in the crowd began examining the cease and desist documents more critically, recognizing that the legal threats contained fundamental errors that undermined their enforceability. The countdown timer showed 9 minutes remaining, as legal intimidation failed to suppress mathematical evidence of systematic financial crimes. Hutchinson's professional authority had been neutralized by his own legal mistakes and Amara's superior knowledge of regulatory frameworks. Zhao's phone emerged from his jacket pocket with the deliberate precision of someone deploying a final weapon. The device's screen glowed as he navigated through carefully organized files, his expression shifting toward something that approached predatory confidence. The legal intimidation had failed, but corporate executives possessed other forms of leverage when conventional pressure proved insufficient. "Ms. Hudson," he said quietly, positioning the phone's screen so only she could see its contents. "I believe you have an 18-year-old daughter attending City College. Engineering program, isn't that correct?" The photograph displayed a young woman with Amara's intelligent eyes and determined expression, walking across a campus quad, with textbooks clutched against her chest. The image had been captured with telephoto precision, suggesting professional surveillance rather than casual observation. "Jessica Hudson." Zhao continued, his voice carrying the soft menace of someone who had researched his target thoroughly. "Full academic scholarship, Dean's List every semester, planning graduate studies in environmental engineering. Bright future ahead of her." Amara's hand tightened around the whiteboard marker, but her mathematical work continued without interruption. Years of protecting her daughter from the consequences of whistleblowing had taught her to compartmentalize personal threats while maintaining professional focus. "Scholarship funding," Zhao explained with casual cruelty, "comes from the Zhao Foundation Educational Trust. Annual awards totaling $12 million to deserving students from working families. Very competitive selection process, extensive background investigations required." The implication crystallized with mathematical precision. Expose the crimes, destroy the daughter's educational future. Remain silent. preserve family security while enabling continued theft from other working families. The moral calculus was designed to paralyze ethical action through personal attachment. "She doesn't know about tonight," Amara said quietly, continuing to write equations that built toward increasingly damaging conclusions about pension fund manipulation. "Perhaps she should," Zhao suggested, showing additional photographs that documented Jessica's daily routine with disturbing thoroughness. Young people need to understand how their choices affect family stability. The surveillance photos revealed intimate knowledge of Jessica's scheduled study locations and social activities. The message was clear without being stated directly. Family safety depended on maternal cooperation with corporate interests. Dr. Wells observed the whispered conversation with growing alarm. "He's threatening her daughter," she announced loudly enough for nearby crowd members to hear, using scholarship funding as leverage to suppress evidence of financial crimes. The accusation sparked immediate reaction among parents in the assembled crowd. "That's extortion," someone called out, "threatening a student's education to cover up theft." The crowd's energy shifted toward outrage at the personal nature of Zhao's intimidation tactics. Amara's phone buzzed with incoming call notification. The caller ID showed Jessica with a heart emoji, her daughter's customary evening check-in during exam preparation periods. The timing was too convenient to represent coincidence. "Answer it," Zhao suggested with false concern. She might have important news about her scholarship status. The phone's speaker activated as Amara accepted the call, her daughter's voice carrying clearly across the marble lobby. "Mom, are you okay? There are videos online showing you at some kind of business meeting. People are saying you're solving math problems for millions of dollars." The warmth in Jessica's voice provided stark contrast to the cold manipulation surrounding Amara. Here was genuine family love being weaponized by corporate interests determined to suppress evidence of systematic theft. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Amara replied, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "Just helping some people understand mathematical relationships in their pension investments." "That's amazing, Mom. I always knew you were brilliant even when those jerks at Stanford tried to destroy your reputation. Are you really going to win $500 million? The pride in Jessica's voice resonated through the assembled crowd, humanizing the stakes beyond abstract financial calculations. This was a daughter's faith in her mother's abilities unwavering, despite years of hardship following academic exile. "The money isn't important," Amara said, carefully, aware that her words were being recorded by multiple devices. "What matters is helping working families recover their stolen retirement savings." "Then do it, Mom. Do the right thing like you taught me. I'm proud of you for standing up to powerful people again. I'll figure out school somehow if anything happens to my scholarship." The unconditional support provided exactly the moral foundation Amara needed to resist Zhao's manipulation. Her daughter's courage strengthened her own resolve to pursue justice despite personal consequences. Zhao's expression darkened as his leverage evaporated through Jessica's public display of family solidarity. The recorded conversation had documented his intimidation tactics while demonstrating the family's rejection of his attempted manipulation. "Very touching," he said with bitter resignation. "But scholarships require annual renewal. Academic excellence alone doesn't guarantee continued funding when family circumstances become complicated." When the threat was explicit, now stated clearly enough for crowd documentation, but crafted to avoid obvious criminal intent, educational funding would disappear unless mathematical evidence of financial crimes remained suppressed. Amara returned to the whiteboard with renewed determination, adding calculations that connected offshore account transfers to systematic pension fund theft. Her mathematical proof was approaching completion despite escalating personal pressure designed to halt her progress. "Cayman Islands Trust, 77492, she said, clearly writing the account number prominently on the whiteboard. $42.6 million transferred from Global Finance Center employee pension accounts. Federal banking records show identical transfer patterns across 17 companies. The specificity of her evidence undermined any remaining doubt about the scope of financial crimes being exposed. These were not vague allegations, but precise accusations supported by documented account numbers and transfer amounts. Trust 77518, she continued, adding another offshore account with corresponding transfer amounts. $38.3 million from healthcare worker pension funds. Trust 77524 $51.7 million from municipal employee retirement accounts. The systematic pattern emerged clearly as Amara documented the mathematical precision of pension fund theft across multiple industries and geographic regions. Her analysis revealed not isolated fraud, but comprehensive criminal enterprise affecting thousands of working families. Martinez approached with obvious reluctance, his radio crackling with urgent instructions. Ms. Hudson, building security requires immediate cessation of unauthorized financial analysis. Legal authorities demand compliance with cease and desist orders. Federal banking records are public documents, Amara replied without turning around. Analysis of regulatory filings represents protected speech under First Amendment provisions. Her legal knowledge provided confident foundation for continued resistance to intimidation tactics. The mathematical evidence stood independently of corporate pressure, supported by constitutional protections that superseded private legal threats. The countdown timer showed 6 minutes remaining, but the challenge had evolved far beyond its original parameters. Mathematical proof had become criminal evidence. Family threats had strengthened rather than weakened resolve, and public documentation ensured that suppression was no longer possible. Zhao watched his final leverage fail as Amara's mathematical analysis approached completion despite every pressure tactic he had deployed. The systematic exposure of financial crimes would proceed regardless of legal, professional, or personal consequences he had threatened. The countdown timer displayed 4 minutes 37 seconds as Amara turned from the whiteboard to face the assembled crowd with the quiet confidence of someone whose mathematical proof had reached irrefutable completion. The equations behind her formed a comprehensive indictment of systematic financial crime that no legal intimidation or personal threats could erase. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying across the marble space with academic authority. What you see documented here represents the largest pension fund theft in American financial history. $847 million stolen from working families through deliberate mathematical manipulation. The crowd pressed closer, drawn by the gravity of her presentation and the systematic nature of evidence she had assembled, despite every obstacle Zhao had deployed. Phone cameras emerged again, recording her explanation, with the understanding that they were witnessing historic exposure of corporate crime. The correlation matrix displayed in tonight's challenge, Amara continued, pointing to specific equations on the whiteboard, contains mathematical impossibilities designed to hide fund transfers. Negative eigenvalues violate basic financial theory. These numbers could not exist in legitimate portfolio optimization. Dr. Kim stepped forward to examine the calculations more closely, his Harvard credentials lending academic weight to the verification process. Her mathematical analysis is completely accurate. These correlation structures represent deliberate falsification, designed to conceal systematic theft, and the academic endorsement provided crucial credibility for crowd members who lacked technical expertise to evaluate complex mathematical relationships independently. Dr. Kim's reputation guaranteed that Amara's conclusions rested on solid theoretical foundation. Dr. Sarah Chen from Goldman Sachs pushed through the crowd to examine the whiteboard calculations with professional scrutiny. "I've worked in portfolio optimization for 15 years, she announced loudly. "These correlation coefficients are mathematically impossible. No legitimate financial model could produce negative eigenvalues of this magnitude." Her Wall Street credentials added powerful validation to Amara's mathematical proof. When investment professionals confirmed the impossibility of Zhao's correlation matrix, even skeptical crowd members had to acknowledge the systematic nature of financial manipulation being exposed. Michael Davidson, a pension fund administrator from Chicago, who had attended tonight's presentation for professional development, studied the account numbers with growing alarm. These transfer patterns match suspicious activities we've been investigating across multiple Midwest pension systems. The correlation manipulation technique is identical. His confirmation revealed that pension fund theft extended far beyond Global Finance Center, suggesting comprehensive criminal enterprise that affected retirement security nationwide. The mathematical techniques displayed on Amara's whiteboard represented standardized methods for stealing from working families across geographic and industry boundaries. Furthermore, Amara said, adding final notations to her mathematical proof, the offshore account numbers Mr. Zhao accidentally confirmed match federal banking records, showing identical theft patterns across 17 different companies. This represents organized criminal enterprise affecting thousands of families. She wrote the comprehensive total prominently on the whiteboard. $2.1 billion stolen from employee pension funds through correlation manipulation between January 2022 and November 2024. The staggering magnitude of theft silenced the lobby completely. $2.1 billion represented life savings of entire generations. Retirement security systematically diverted to offshore accounts controlled by corporate executives who had betrayed fundamental fiduciary responsibilities. David Rodriguez from the Securities and Exchange Commission, who had been observing quietly from the crowd's periphery, stepped forward with official authority. As federal regulatory representative, I'm confirming that tonight's mathematical evidence will initiate immediate investigation into systematic pension fund manipulation across multiple jurisdictions. His presence explained the rapid federal response to tonight's events. Regulatory authorities had been monitoring potential pension fund irregularities, and Amara's mathematical proof provided the comprehensive evidence necessary to trigger formal criminal investigation. Jennifer Walsh quickly approached Rodriguez with professional urgency. This represents the largest financial crime story in decades. Federal investigation based on mathematical proof developed in real time before hundreds of witnesses. Can you confirm official SEC response? Comprehensive investigation beginning immediately, Rodriguez confirmed. Mathematical evidence suggests criminal conspiracy involving multiple corporations and offshore financial institutions. Federal prosecutors are reviewing charges under RICO statutes for organized criminal enterprise. Zhao realized that his mathematical challenge had created exactly the public documentation necessary to expose crimes he had intended to keep hidden. The systematic nature of Amara's proof left no room for denial or alternative explanation. "This is ridiculous," he said desperately, his composure finally cracking under mathematical scrutiny. Complex financial instruments require sophisticated management techniques that ordinary people cannot understand. The defensive statement was precisely wrong for someone claiming innocence. Guilty parties typically attacked the complexity of evidence rather than addressing specific accusations directly. "Sophisticated enough to steal retirement money from custodial workers," Maria Santos observed with quiet anger. "Sophisticated enough to hide theft behind mathematical formulas we were never supposed to understand." Her words resonated through assembled employees who recognized that complexity had been weaponized against them. Mathematical manipulation had transformed straightforward theft into academic exercise designed to confuse rather than illuminate. Zhao made his critical error in responding to Maria's accusation. Those pension fund transfers represent legitimate portfolio rebalancing between domestic and international investment vehicles. Phase 3 offshore restructuring was approved by corporate governance committees. The admission was comprehensive and devastating. Phase 3 offshore restructuring had never appeared in the original mathematical challenge. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the criminal scheme would reference specific operational phases. Phase 3, Amara repeated clearly, adding the terminology to her whiteboard documentation. Mr. Zhao just confirmed systematic planning for offshore fund transfers that he previously denied existed. The verbal confession had been recorded by dozens of phones, creating permanent evidence that no legal threat could suppress. Zhao's desperate attempt to justify theft had instead provided definitive proof of criminal intent and systematic planning. Wells stepped forward with academic authority. As witnesses to tonight's events, we have moral obligation to ensure this evidence reaches appropriate regulatory authorities. The Securities and Exchange Commission must investigate systematic pension fund manipulation. Her call for official action sparked immediate agreement throughout the crowd. Contact the FBI, someone suggested. Financial crimes of this magnitude require federal investigation. The assembled witnesses recognized their responsibility to ensure evidence reached appropriate authorities. Hutchinson, the attorney, made desperate attempt to regain control. All statements tonight represent privileged communications, protected from disclosure under attorney-client confidentiality provisions. You arrived after the confessions, Jennifer Walsh, the financial journalist, pointed out with professional precision. No privilege applies to statements made before legal representation was established. What the legal technicality was immediately obvious to anyone following the evening's chronology. Zhao's admissions had occurred during his original challenge presentation, before attorneys arrived to provide protection. Martinez received final radio instruction from building management. Code Black, prepare for immediate evacuation. Federal authorities en route for emergency investigation. The security announcement confirmed that tonight's mathematical proof had triggered official response. Federal agencies were treating Amara's evidence as credible basis for criminal investigation rather than academic curiosity. Zhao's final breakdown was complete and public. You have no idea what you've destroyed, he shouted toward Amara, his careful composure dissolving into rage and desperation. Decades of financial planning, hundreds of millions in legitimate business development, thousands of jobs dependent on corporate stability, and stability built on stolen retirement money, Amara replied calmly. Legitimate business doesn't require theft from working families to maintain profitability. The contrast between his emotional breakdown and her mathematical precision provided perfect summary of the evening's confrontation. Systematic theft had been exposed through patient analysis, despite every pressure tactic designed to suppress evidence. The countdown timer reached 0 with electronic finality, but the challenge had transcended its original parameters entirely. Mathematical proof had become criminal evidence. Academic exercise had evolved into historic exposure of corporate crime, and individual courage had inspired collective demand for justice. You promised $500 million to whoever solves your problem, Amara said with quiet authority. I solved your crime. The solution is justice for every family whose retirement security you stole. And the crowd erupted in sustained applause, their appreciation recognizing not just mathematical brilliance, but moral courage that had exposed systematic theft, despite overwhelming pressure to remain silent. Zhao stood defeated before the mathematical evidence of his crimes. His corporate empire crumbling under scrutiny, he had never anticipated from someone he had dismissed as mere entertainment. The lobby's crystal chandeliers cast harsh light on handcuffs, clicking around Zhao's wrists as federal agents secured him for transport to detention facilities. His $1,000 suit appeared rumpled and defeated. Corporate authority reduced to criminal liability through mathematical proof he had never anticipated. Zhao Mingwei, Agent Rodriguez announced formally. You are under arrest for federal charges, including conspiracy wire fraud, money laundering, and violation of Employee Retirement Income Security Act provisions. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights echoed across marble surfaces as assembled witnesses documented the culmination of Amara's mathematical investigation. Phone cameras captured every moment of justice being delivered to someone who had systematically stolen retirement security from working families. Hutchinson attempted final legal intervention. Federal arrest based on mathematical speculation violates due process provisions. Our client demands immediate release pending proper investigation. Mathematical speculation supported by confession recorded on 47 separate devices. Agent Rodriguez replied with bureaucratic precision. Federal prosecutors consider tonight's evidence sufficient for immediate detention pending grand jury proceedings. The legal reality was undeniable. Zhao's verbal admissions, combined with Amara's systematic mathematical proof, provided comprehensive foundation for federal prosecution under multiple criminal statutes. Furthermore, Agent Rodriguez continued addressing the assembled crowd. All witnesses present tonight will receive federal subpoenas requiring testimony before grand jury investigation. Tonight's events represent crucial evidence in what appears to be the largest pension fund theft in American history. The magnitude of federal response confirmed that Amara's mathematical analysis had triggered comprehensive criminal investigation, extending far beyond Global Finance Center. Her individual courage had exposed systematic crimes affecting thousands of families nationwide. As federal agents escorted Zhao toward the building's exit, he turned toward Amara with bitter recognition of his complete defeat. $500 million, he said quietly. You earned it through mathematical precision. Federal seizure of offshore accounts will ensure payment. The admission represented final acknowledgement of her victory. Even in defeat, Zhao recognized that Amara had legitimately solved his challenge by exposing the criminal enterprise hidden within academic exercise. Within 6 hours, videos of Amara's mathematical confrontation began spreading across digital platforms with viral intensity. The story of a cleaning woman exposing billionaire fraud through systematic mathematical analysis captured global imagination and sympathy. Cleaning lady defeats billionaire with math became the most viewed news story across multiple platforms. Professional media outlets competed to interview Amara, while academic institutions rushed to offer positions that would restore her professional reputation. By morning, her phone contained 43 interview requests from major news organizations. Stanford University's dean personally called to offer department chair position, leading their new Financial Crime Detection Institute. Harvard, MIT, and Chicago followed with competing offers that exceeded her previous academic salary. Publishers engaged in bidding war for book rights to her story. Hidden in plain sight, How Mathematical Truth Exposed Wall Street's Biggest Crime received advance offers exceeding $2 million. The narrative of academic redemption through moral courage resonated with readers worldwide. Jessica called from City College with excitement barely contained by phone connection. Mom, you're everywhere online. My engineering professors are showing your mathematical proof in classes as example of practical problem solving. Everyone knows you're brilliant now. The pride in her daughter's voice provided personal validation that exceeded professional recognition. Years of hardship following Stanford dismissal had been vindicated through public demonstration of mathematical expertise and moral courage. Federal investigators confirmed that offshore account seizures had recovered $847 million in stolen pension funds. Additional investigation revealed comprehensive criminal network affecting 17 companies and 3,000 employee families. Complete pension restoration plus damages, Agent Rodriguez announced during press conference. Every affected family will recover stolen retirement funds with interest and punitive compensation for financial hardship. The promise of full restitution provided justice for working families whose trust had been systematically betrayed. Mathematical truth had delivered practical results that restored financial security to people who deserved protection rather than exploitation. 6 months later, Amara stood before packed lecture hall at Stanford University, teaching advanced financial mathematics to graduate students who understood they were learning from someone who had exposed the largest pension fund theft in American history. Mathematical truth, she told her students, represents more than abstract theory. When applied with moral courage, mathematics becomes a tool for justice that protects working families from exploitation by powerful interests. Her textbook, based on tonight's mathematical investigation, had become required reading in finance programs nationwide. Hidden in Plain Sight remained #1 bestseller for 18 consecutive weeks, inspiring investigations of pension fund security across multiple industries. The Zhao Foundation Educational Trust had been restructured under federal oversight to ensure legitimate scholarship distribution. Jessica's engineering degree was fully funded through court-ordered restitution, while hundreds of other students received guaranteed educational support. Global Finance Center employees received complete pension restoration, plus 5 years additional contributions as compensatory damages. Maria Santos used her settlement to purchase a small house for her family, while Carmen Rodriguez enrolled in community college business program. Ms. Hudson never touched another mop, Maria observed with satisfaction during reunion gathering. She teaches mathematics now, like she always deserved, but she still visits us, still cares about working families. The personal relationships forged during tonight's confrontation had evolved into lasting friendships based on shared struggle for justice. Amara's individual courage had inspired collective recognition that working families deserved protection from financial exploitation. Wells published comprehensive academic analysis of pension fund vulnerability in Harvard Business Review. The Hudson Method, mathematical detection techniques became known, was implemented by federal regulators to prevent future theft through correlation manipulation. Zhao received a 15-year federal sentence for organized criminal enterprise. His corporate empire was dissolved through court order, with assets distributed to pension fund restitution and victim compensation programs. Sometimes, Amara concluded her final lecture of the semester. The most important mathematical problems are hidden in places where no one expects to find them. Truth emerges when someone has courage to look carefully and calculate precisely. Her students understood they were witnessing a living example of mathematics applied with moral purpose. Academic knowledge, combined with personal courage, had delivered justice that protected thousands of families from systematic exploitation. The story that began with public humiliation in Marble Lobby had evolved into global inspiration for anyone facing overwhelming opposition. Individual determination, mathematical precision, and moral courage had proven more powerful than corporate intimidation, legal threats, or personal pressure. Mathematical truth had prevailed.